It's the year 2000. America resides in a time of social and economic prosperity. Patriotism is at an all-time high. Americans celebrate the turn of the century as an introduction into a new age of greatness. The nation is a fortress, impenetrable, mighty, powerful. Within the walls of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, capitalism is king. The United States will remain untouchable, unbreakable, and invincible. Right?
September 11, 2001. Jericho falls. A Middle Eastern extremist terrorist organization known as Al Qaeda launches an attack on America. At the orders of Osama bin Laden, the organization hijacked four American flights. One crash landed in a Pennsylvania field. Another was sent into the Pentagon. The last two struck the World Trade Centers in New York. The attack shattered the American sense of invincibility and led the nation into a long era of foreign paranoia.
An immediate effect on our government was the structure of the TSA. The agency's foundation was a direct consequence of the attack. At that time, Americans were fine with the changes as they appeared to be for safety, but these changes would be the groundwork for the full suppression of citizens' rights.
As the American public watched their veil of invulnerability crumble before them, the American government, fueled by a wave of fear and urgency, quickly mobilized to restore a sense of security and control. On October 26, 2001, the U.S. government passed the Patriot Act, which would change the course of citizens' rights forever.
The U.S. Patriot Act marked a significant turning point in American governance and civil rights. The act allowed the U.S. government to tap into phone records of anyone suspected of being involved in acts of terrorism. The act supposedly adapted the law to a more modern time, but was eventually used to commit warrantless searches on up to 3.4 million phone lines, a clear violation of the people's rights. This led to an extreme effect on free speech as many became reluctant to express dissent or engage in political activism for fear of being monitored. Communities who are already marginalized, specifically those of Middle Eastern descent, experience intensified profiling and suspicion, further deepening division in the nation. Over time, the effects of the act permeated everyday life, raising questions about the imbalance between liberty and security.
The immediacy of the act being passed also raises issues. With little time for thought, the Patriot Act left sparse room for oversight or limitations. This is especially true for the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. The DHS was created in November of 2002, just a year after 9/11. Just like the previously mentioned Patriot Act, the hasty action in creating the department led to many faults and oversights in its finer details, such as their mission's objective. The DHS is vaguely tasked with increasing the security within the borders of the United States.
The DHS's intellectual dishonesty surrounding national security does not end there. With the expansion of its power through two major agencies, those being Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection, ICE and the CPB respectively. As mass waves of McCarthy-like paranoia and xenophobia spread across the country, ICE was authorized to spend up to $3.3 billion in major mass deportation efforts. Alarmingly, members of ICE and the DHS also crafted a plan known as Operation Endgame, proposed in 2003. The operation outlined plans to deport every quote-unquote deportable alien and suspected terrorist, a sentiment that would cause shock in the masses today, but due to the paranoia and xenophobia which had consumed the country, the plan received very little pushback.
The foundation of ICE and CBP in March of 2003 would mark one of the most significant losses of civil liberties in our nation's history. Since 2003, the impact of ICE has disproportionately grown as well as their scope broadened, leaving a strain on the agency as well as DHS, while also lacking the necessary oversight to pursue their goals freely and fairly. This organization became a further manifestation of America's heightened sense of vulnerability. This progression of the fear of insecurity is exemplified in how the American government utilizes ICE. Today, ICE's operations often extend beyond their original mission, transforming into a sweeping law enforcement presence that inordinately targets marginalized communities under the guise of national security. As a result, this has created an atmosphere of fear where immigrant families live in constant fear and uncertainty.
ICE has shown since its inception the propensity to target individuals based on race. The widespread xenophobia of Islamic persons shortly following 9/11 that inspired many of ICE's actions during that time still persists today. However, xenophobia has taken a new insidious form as immigrants from our southern borders seeking refuge in our country are all labeled as drug dealers and criminals. In February 2025, the government is giving ICE the authority to commit mass sweeps for illegal aliens, which is very reminiscent of the previously mentioned phone taps searching for suspected terrorism.
In 2024, Congress's ban on TikTok, framed as a measure of national security, echoes the post 9/11 era when fear led to significant restrictions on civil liberties. This piece of legislation mirrors the Patriot Act and raises concerns about the deterioration of free expression and increased governmental surveillance reminiscent of past abuse. The cloud of paranoia surrounding data privacy and forward influence essences the xenophobia seen after 9/11, where targeted communities faced unjust scrutiny. History has proven that reacting to fear with restrictive policies often compromises individual rights, prompting us to question whether those actions genuinely protect us or merely pave the way for further infringements on our freedom. Aftermath The aftermath of the September 11 attacks marked a profound transformation in American governance and civil liberties. In a climate of fear and urgency, legislation like the Patriot Act drastically shifted the balance between security and individual rights, enabling sweeping surveillance measures that target millions as stifled free expression. The rapid establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, along with agencies like ICE and CBP, further institutionalized a culture of fear, particularly against marginalized communities. Pervasive surveillance and lack of oversight led to significant violations of civil liberties, creating an environment of constant anxiety among immigrant families.